when the insolvency gets announced on the 20th, I'm having coffee with someone because I don't even know about it.
Oh,
I find out half an hour before, and it's on an email. So I'm not checking the email, I'm looking at it. And then I find out by looking at Bloomberg.
inflated sales number. I know I read a lot about it. Is there a possibility that someone were cooking the books until your time being a CEO, or no, not really? Company, instead of using AI, we're using 700 Indians.
We didn't have 700 people in India. That was the whole point I was trying to explain to people. We were like 700 people barely globally. Mahmoud, I ran fast, learned a lot, moved on to my next adventure.
Builder.ai reached $1.5 billion valuation. Then it collapsed into insolvency, and the internet rushed to explain it with one single word: fraud. This is the first long-term interview after the downfall with the founder himself, Sachin Dev Duggal, the chief wizard of Builder.ai. In this conversation, we go where the headlines didn't, what Builder.ai was actually trying to build from day one, what really happened in the final weeks before the collapse, what the AI truly did, what humans did, and whether the story about 700 engineers doing AI work was ever real. Quick disclaimer, I briefly worked in Builder.ai for a few months before the whole controversy happened. This is not an endorsement. This is an independent interview. Now let's start from the beginning. How did Builder.ai really get started?
I moved to San Francisco. I'd gone on a trip and everybody was taking the same picture. I said, guys, we can send a man to the moon. Why are we taking 20 people take the same 20 shots? There must be a better way of sharing photos. And that's when I remember at school, I'd studied things like symbolic systems and so on and so forth. And one of the things that really interested me was well, it knows I'm in your phone book and you're in my phone book and we're together because photos have longitude and latitude on them. Well, why can't it just share it automatically? So I went down that path. And as I was going down that, Google bought Bump, which was for contactless contact sharing. That eventually became Google Photos. And there was this race, but they had Drive, it was Google. At the same time, what I was seeing a lot was friends of mine were trying to build software and just getting rogered, right? Developers trying it themselves, their uncle, aunt, what have you. And I was like, well, I think we're late to photos. But I'm really intrigued, like most of these software. And it was like this most random thought. I was like, I wonder, software is like this really big container, but code is too small. And we had originally started by saying, you can build a piece of software and we'd give you the team. Like, it wasn't very bright. And then, in all honesty, we had these research students who were doing an MBA, a business school project, who reached out saying, we'd love to do a free research project for you. I said, great. I said, well, we're thinking about features, we're thinking about this. What do you think? And they came back and said, we think the right atomic unit is features. And I said, I thought as much, though I'd say it's mostly that work. And then we actually sat down and wrote down the features that make up 30, 40 applications. And we're like, oh my God, they're the same. 80% is the same, 70% is the same. And so then we expanded to 100, ended up becoming like this perfect linear decay curve. And what you realized was, sort of fast forward, what you realized when we started Builder and then we grew is that the top 30% of features, the basket size was 19. Kind of makes sense, right? Registration, forget password, login, payments. The next 30% was 57 features. So 60% of all software was about 71 features or thereabouts. And that was mind-blowing. It's like, because everyone said software is unique. And so Builder started with this very simple observation that most people that now wanted to be a part of the digital or app or software economy didn't have an engineering background. And they were getting really rogered by developers. And more importantly, people were just rewriting the same stuff again. Kind of feels like 2025's been like, it's like 2016 again, except that some machines are rewriting the same stuff again and again. And our thesis was, well, you shouldn't if you're going to get truly predictable, fast, high quality software, you shouldn't have to build the same feature again. It's all about stitching and customization. Custom is what's unique to you. And it's more important to, we used to say this in math, tend to infinity than be infinite. And tending to infinity is a lot cheaper than truly being infinite. And in most cases, you don't need to reinvent login because it's the same 3 variations. And the same thing applies to design, and the same thing applies to those things. Like, there's only so many combinations of permutations because we're creatures of habit. And that was it. That's what got us started.
And Builder.ai promised faster, cheaper software delivery. How did the platform technically deliver on that promise?
Yeah. So look, I think, we took the view that the entire SDLC had to be redesigned. And so SDLC is in the software development lifecycle. So what do I mean by that? So in software, you really have like 4 constituent parts. The first is what are you building? The why and the what. Why you should know because it's your problem. But the role of the product manager is to interrogate the why and create the what. And the what is ultimately, here are the features, here's how they're going to get customized, here's how they're going to talk to each other, and here's how they deliver against the why. The next part of it is the how. And the how is the developer, right, or the engineer, and they're writing the code to develop, to build, hopefully to reintegrate, do third party. Then you have someone who's going to test it, and then you have deployment, which we call DevOps. And so the idea was, how could we have a single thread that connected all 4? But the atomic unit of work was the feature, so that every single time the feature went through these 4 stages, it was being enriched. And so let's start with the obvious. You're building an application, let's just say it's got 100 features. Well, we kind of knew that 60 features to 80 features were going to be out of the box. So rather than building 80, even if you got 50% of the work done on those things, you're at 40% already. Now imagine the amount of time it takes to ask someone questions, get answers back, write those notes up, ask more questions, get answers back. With the human process, that can take 8 weeks to 12 weeks. If we did it well, we could do it in a day. So you have to remember, building software is not the amount of man days. The building software is the end from first conversation to it's live. So now you saved another 20-odd percent, 30% of time. So now you're at, let's say worst case, 50% time saving. And then it's like, can you test at scale? So you don't have to have just somebody going through and especially every time you make a change, right? The application gets bigger. It's in computer science, we go, it's an NP problem, because basically, like, every time you make a change, you have to go test everything all over again. But if you can automate that testing, then you're really sound. Now, a big part of testing was visual. Does it look like the design? And I remember we were having this really bizarre conversation in 2019. I was saying, I wonder if we could use computer vision to do the quality testing. But the problem is different devices, generated content versus static content. But in the end, like, even if you got it 67% right, so you started shaving away through both AI and automation and reusability, vast amounts. Then it came down to what, look, 20%, 30% still needs to be done by a human. It's the customization. And the big leap between 2019 and let's say 2023, or even 2024, is we said, okay, it's going to be 30%, but can we really monitor and control it? So we found like the bizarrest behavior from these developers. We had people clocking in 18 hours. We're like, it's impossible you're doing 18 hours for 5 days a week. Impossible. Then we started to do things like, you know what, I have a hunch. Can we pull up some of the PRs of what these folks are doing? And let's look at the last 10 PRs or at a feature level. And we started to see people deleting lines of code and then adding the lines of code and then deleting the lines of code and then adding the lines of code. And I was like, wow, this is fraud. And so we started to measure developers on net addition of lines. We had a metric that we were looking at on my dashboard. It told us a huge amount. We found massive amounts of inefficiency. So because we could do it this at industrial scale. And then as you got to sort of 23, 24, we started to say, well, hang on a second. I wonder how much of these customizations are unique. Could we effectively map what was said to the customization? And then when we hear something similar, reconstruct the customization. And so you were starting to see, like, it wasn't like a do one thing and you get a woof answer. it was always about step by step, how do you reduce the amount of human involvement and human creation?
And by 2024, what was in Builder AI automated and what was not automated?
So I would say black box testing was not automated, even though actually we had it automated. But I think the humans in our own loop were uncomfortable because it would find like pixel level issues. And so it created a lot of noise. Customization, we had just launched the first version of Codegen. So you could say, I want you to do this for this feature. And it did a pretty good job of generating the custom code, but it wasn't working across the entire build cycle. So we still had developers from the network, but every single build card, we used to call it, every single build card had less and less human involvement needed. The issue we hadn't quite mustered, and I think we got better at, was just the wastage of hours that were kicking in. And it was always those things that new things were getting better, the old things were dragging on because they were built on an earlier version of the platform. But and when you change the platform, you didn't auto upgrade the build methods for the other one because it would mean restarting, right? Because the methods changed so much. Customers, the product manager experience, the front end, Natasha was there, very good for the first part. But we still had humans going through what do you want to build? Have you thought about this? That expertise, that warmth in the conversation was very important. And I still don't think you're in a place where you can remove that. I think you're getting very close with stuff, what 11 Labs and what others are doing, where you can synthesize the voice. It's got much more of an emotional connect. But the thing is, today's AI doesn't think. So if it doesn't think, you can't make it to a product manager role. All you can do is pattern match a bunch of questions and get answers for it, which kind of works for 80, 90%. So I'd say that, so customization and then the final black box testing. Above and beyond that, the rest was automated. Whether AI or non-AI.
And you mentioned Natasha, the AI product manager. What exactly the role that Natasha played? Was it actually AI or just a scripted assistant?
No, so Natasha was fully AI. Natasha's role in the beginning was very simple. How can we get you to see something that resonates with what you want as fast as possible? So that seems really simple, but we knew the magic moment was when they just said something, they answered some questions, and like, poof, it shows them a screenshot, or it shows them a wireframe, or it shows them a storyboard of an application. That was a hypothesis. And if anybody ever went to a Builder.ai stand or booth or exhibition space, it used to blow people's mind, because you could have this conversation, within 20 minutes, you'd see something. The second was, and this is sort of where it was going, the role was to be the product manager. So the role was, what do you want to build? Ask interrogation questions around it. Let you ask questions. I remember this one example, I used to use it a lot. It's like, I'm the head of customer experience for a car insurance company. And, I want to build an application that people can sign up to policies and so on and so forth. And then we'd ask the question, which is, well, how do I stop fraud? Right? Because I don't want people with a pre-existing accident to sign up a policy. And that's when we started to see, it came back with, oh, well, you could ask people to take a picture. And so the minute an end user saw that, it just blew their mind, because it was the first time you had a real reasonable question being asked that was in the context of what I was trying to solve. And the user had a real problem they were trying to solve around fraud and so on and so forth. And it came up with a really great idea. So Natasha's job was, how do we take lots of this conversation and convert it into a spec? Features, user stories, epics, notes, and timestamp it so that we know what customers are like. They'll change their mind, which is perfectly fine. But we just need to know that you've changed your mind, and when did you change it? And so Natasha was this entire end-to-end experience. And then the next part of Natasha was going to be what we had started, which was, now take these user stories, take these epics, take these notes, and convert them into code. that sits on top of the reusable features. So the custom code. The other thing Natasha was also doing was she was presenting back to you a storyboard of the application, the features you needed, recommending those features, then you would add them. And so that whole product manager experience was heavily lightened and made much more predictable. Because the big issue, right, is if you went through the product management experience with any company as a sales experience, depending on who you spoke to, you either got 50 features or 100 features. But it was all down to like the human interpretation and also their bias. Did they just want to sell you more? Were they trying to use up all your budget? We really wanted to do away with that. What we really wanted was, you say what you want, we'll give you the right set of features, and it's predictable. Like if you ask the same thing every day, you get the same set of features every day. And that was really important for us. And that also shaped how we built the tech, because we didn't want it to be fully generative because it would have the same human problem, which is it's like a random path in the morning.
So in Builder.ai, you guys used AI to take the heavy load of scoping, decision-making, or code generation, or all three?
Well, I would say it was across the board of those four things. So I'd say product management, on the best case, was 80%. On the worst case, it was 40, 50%. I'd say on code and project management, so stories and epics and notes was 100%. Like basically that was it was a single source of truth. Coding, we had started it where I think if you had 20, 30% on average custom code, the idea was to bring it down to like 5%. I don't think you'd ever get rid of it because there's some complex functions. There's the custom features, there's things that are unique. That it's just not worth the headache to have a stochastic parrot write the code because you're going to sit and fix it, right? But make the button pink or make it blue or make it red. Yeah, you don't need machine for that. Have two-factor authentication versus single, stitch the code between these features. You shouldn't need a human for that. Then you had deployment. So most underrated part of building software is deployment, and we had fully automated it, right? It had its issues, but like we had created structure and containers and how stuff was shipped out and how infrastructure was deployed. And that's why you could do it at scale. And look, I think a part of this, Mahmoud, was it was cyclical. You had to keep going through the cycle. We had to keep driving customers through a cycle and new customers coming in, because then we would learn, oh, okay, you know what? That's an edge case, right? We need to go, well, that's no longer an edge case. That's now a big case. So we need to go fix around that. I could give you an example. The reason we started doing Natasha listening to calls, and this was the first co-pilot as such, was she would listen to the calls and then she would write the notes, give you answers, suggested answers if the customer asked a question. But more than anything, she would timestamp it. So that when a customer came to, I didn't say that. We're like, no, you did say that. It's okay. You can change your mind, but you did say it. Like, here's when you said it. And I think that those things were really important lessons that you only learn when it's in the wild.
I really appreciate your transparency. But with code generation, how much percentage you say it was like AI?
No, so the code gen system we built,
sure,
which was early 24, for the things it could handle,
sure,
it did it.
Okay.
But it never went into the wild. Like, it never became a part of all development. So it was in a lab context. We were using the language models, but we were generating code on top of our existing features. Sure. So things like story orchestration we'd done, the planning engine. And so for simple things, it worked well. The problem is like for bigger things, it didn't. And so we were at the stage where we were tweaking, improving, fixing, so that last 20, 30% that was human effort could be further reduced. So if you ask me, if you had 100 features to customize, I reckon where Codegen had got to, I think 20 to 30% of it would have been done without any human intervention. I think the 30 to 100% needed the training, tweaking, improvement that naturally would have come in. But our advantage was we had lots of code. So what we were trying to do was build on the back of code we had learned. Now, here's the other thing in Codegen. So we started this Codegen project, And I remember it was like 20 of us sat in a room, said, guys, like we got 60 days. I think we can get this done. And as we were going through it, we realized, well, hang on a second. Why do we need to generate this customization every time? Why is the customization not making its way back to the Lego blocks so we can just reuse the customization? So then we said, hang on a second, there's another thing here. And I used the Uber pool analogy. So we had this discussion saying, let's just say we've got a feature called profile view. Right? It shows your picture, name, details, blah, blah, blah. In a given 30-day window, how many people are going to have profile view? 100. Great. Well, if we took all the customizations of all 100, how many are the same customization? So actually, it's a map reduce function. So we could just reduce the effort because of industrial scale innovation versus just generating. So that's why it's very hard to say the impact of Codegen on its own.
Got you.
Because one of the things that we also did at the same time was like, well, hang on a second, we should be able to sequence so that we just do the customization once and we repurpose it.
Again, what you said is very reasonable, which is 20, 30% generated by this AI, 30 to 40, you need some tweaking, and
Yeah.
the rest by developer. Why there's a narrative out there that you, Builder.ai, said or claimed that everything is done by AI, and on the back end, we had like 700 engineers?
It's a bit silly because if you went to our website and our website had been, that page had been pretty consistent since 2022, even before in different versions, and it said human assisted AI.
Okay.
We coined the term. So if it wasn't human assisted, why would we say it? If we needed to be false marketing, we just say entirely AI. But the point was any customer that went through it, they knew. I mean, just look at the brass tacks. You go through the checkout experience and it says 8 weeks. Well, if it's a machine, it doesn't need 8 weeks. It's pretty obvious. And so also we never had 700 people in India. So that's a complete misnomer. The false or fake news aside, the crux of it was from when we started, where I'd say technology automated 10% in 2018, to when I left, like I think we'd got it on average up to 70, 80%, in some cases even higher. And here's the thing, if we'd seen that before, it was super fast. If we hadn't seen all of those things before, then you needed the human involvement, right? But that's the whole point. You were learning and improving that process. And we always said we had an expert network. It's written on the website. And we needed the expert network to do the customization. In fact, our engineers never worked for the customer. We had a special group called the Senseis. They were the only ones that dealt with like deep customer integrations. Otherwise, everything was done by the expert network, who were picked by the hour to do the last mile. That was in every presentation. It was in every conversation. And it's just obvious, like if it was all, even today, by the way, in the vibe coding world, if you other than building something really simple, you've got no chance it does it without a human.
True.
And I think that's the key.
It's good for prototyping. Lovable is amazing for prototyping, but try to get something for production.
Yeah, and I think it's the same with a lot of them, right? It's, you can build a simple application. You could build like CRUD-like applications, right? So database-driven ones. But you're going to go build a legal management system or a LinkedIn for construction workers or XYZ on it. No, it's tough. Because also, remember, it's a combination of the why and the what in the beginning. And they're focused on the how, which is the writing of the code, the generation of it. The second part of it is everyone's generating everything from scratch. So, the thing that I found I thought was insanely good marketing was OpenAI's token awards.
Okay.
Who bought the most tokens? I'm like, wow, that's like who spent the most with me.
Yes.
And I was like, surely the innovation here is how do I build the same thing and every month use less tokens? Forget the cost of the token. I just use less tokens because efficiency is an engineering problem. And that will force, which I think is going to happen now anyway, us into this neurosymbolic world, which if you go back to what we built, graph, language models, reusability, assembly line, we built the first neurosymbolic platform for building software. It had lots of kinks in it, so be it. But we built what they're starting to build in 26 in 2019. And I think the idea of bringing these multiple disciplines together is so important. And it's a core part of, the other thing was in 24, 25, basically AI meant language model. And so you talked about graphs or machine learning or anything else, like no one was interested anymore. It's like, does it use an LLM? Like how many billions of model? I remember in one customer meeting, how many parameters does your model have? It's like, we don't use one. It's not our model. But our knowledge graph has these many edges and these many nodes. And it just wasn't the parlance that they were interested in.
You once said that you reduced the time and cost to build those apps by 95%. What do you think it was the biggest factor? Was it like this AI or the way that you were able to reconstruct or to use those modularized components?
Look, I think it's a sum of all parts. And the reason is this. There are certain things you do that give you the biggest impact. That's the Lego blocks, because they're giant chunks of reusable code. But you can't enact or use those Lego blocks at scale unless you have the AI that knows what to use and how to plumb. And then you have, like, we called it the run engine. The run engine was like, if you imagine a Lego, you have the base plate. The Lego sits on top of the base plate, and then you can build on top. You have no base plate, you can't build Lego. Mm-hmm. And so the run engine was the base plate that allowed all the features to talk to each other. If you didn't have any one of these three things, you would be reliant on a human to start dealing with 100 Lego blocks that would have issues. We saw that. You'd rely on trying to hard code feature conversations using developers. Well, that would cause all sorts of chaos because they'll all write it differently. And then what about DevOps or the deployment, right? An average deployment in the old way of building software could take 2 weeks. We were deploying in an hour, maybe 2 hours, or worst case, a little bit longer. And so it's the sum of all those parts. And I think that was the thing, was every improvement actually had a disproportionate impact on every other improvement. And this was the key. It had to be, a lot of people said to me, Sachin, you built a lot. Like there was this article by the pragmatic programmer. A lot of what he said was very true, right? You guys built a lot, you built wide. Why do you have to go build your own builder meet? I was like, well, because when we were using a third-party solution, we were getting a delay in the audio, right? And so no one really understood this, but like, because Natasha needed to listen to the call, we needed to listen, understand, generate an answer, get it back to the productologist in sub 100 milliseconds. We just weren't getting there when we were stuck on a third-party platform. Now, those third-party platforms got improved, but we had to make a decision there and then, which is like, well, either Natasha's going to be a co-pilot or not. And if you've got 200 millisecond latency, it's basically saying, hi, my name is, right? And so you imagine like the customer's going to think the person's retarded because they're just slow and they're waiting to, and then they have to read, like if it's a big answer that Natasha's generated back, they have to read it. And so that's why we started building Builder Meet. And then we realized that, Builder Meet might be useful for all customers to use in their own system and so on and so forth. And so we had to build wide because, Mahmoud, the important thing is the atomic unit of software was the feature. Mm-hmm. We had to make sure the feature was enriched. What does enriching mean? Enriching means asking questions, getting answers. Enriching means what other features it talks to. Enriching means design patterns or design improvements. Enriching means custom code. And so we had to track this thing all the way through the system. Another good example, we used to use Miro. And then we moved to build a whiteboard. So everyone's like, why would you build a whiteboarding system? I was like, well, because we can't read inside Miro. So we don't know what you've done on it. And so if we can't capture the information, more importantly, forget it, because you could take a screenshot and give it to us. Or the human could take a screenshot. We need to know in what order that information was created. Because there's something about Now we call it chain of reasoning. But there's something about chain of thought, which tells us a lot. Now, at that point in time, we didn't know what it would tell us. But we knew that understanding why you put this post-it, and then you put this post-it, and then you put this post-it, oh, and then you move this post-it and put this in the middle. We knew that that had contextual relevance. And we weren't going to get the data from something else. Another good example, we started off with Pivotal Tracker. Then we went to an open source tracker. Then we built our own tracker. Because we realized very quickly, we needed an element of fine control, because ultimately we knew more and more of this was going to be governed and controlled by the AI. So in 24, we had this early project, which I actually think then made it out into 360, which was, it would tell the productologist, this is what I need you to do today. It was a game changer, right? And so we'd had this vision for a year, which was, we want the humans at Builder deal with customers to have an AI assistant, like a executive assistant, who will tell them what they need to get done, organize their diary. If we start getting inbound customer requests for new specs, it will reposition their diary so that we could deal with it. But effectively, it meant we could, at large, manage the resources internally, right? So we get more productivity out. To be able to do that one thing, we needed to be able to plug into all of the different plumbing elements, right? And understand them. And this was the whole point. We needed to understand that entire 360. So it's not like we built wide from the beginning. We had no option because the rest of the systems were not AI friendly. And then as they started to become AI friendly, everybody was doing their own thing. So we were stuck, imagine trying to build a piece of software, you're missing a bunch of information on spec. Trying to build a piece of software, you don't have real-time conversation with the customer. Trying to build a piece of software, you don't have the project management system. Trying to build a piece of software, and it's not like we built the database ourselves. We use databases that exist. It's not like we built a new version of Terraform or Ansible. We use a lot of the stuff that existed, but where we needed to build, because it was either an interface or a critical component, we built it.
I've tried to explain Builder.ai to friends, but it's really hard to put it in a box. What makes it different from traditional no-code tools or agencies?
So now I think you've got three worlds. I think the no-code world has merged a little into the vibe coding world. And then you've got agencies, which to me are really the product manager and the customization of those tools. Builder, we basically said you didn't need anyone in front. Our view was we didn't want to put anyone in front. I mean, if they were a go-to-market partner, great. But if they weren't a go-to-market partner, you didn't need to have someone in front. We would interface with you in whatever level of sophistication you wanted us to interface, which is why we had productologists, because I don't think an AI can do it on its own. But we wouldn't need you to find someone to customize and so forth. We wanted to give you finished product. And why was that different? Well, that was different because our customers are non-technical, or there were enterprises that needed an outcome, not an output. And so our badge was running on it. So we needed to make sure the outcome that was being delivered was our quality. We definitely started in 24 seeding the idea. It's a little like, for a long time, you could only buy Apple products at an Apple store. Then you started to get Apple authorized resellers, right? And so we started toying with the idea of Builder authorized resellers. And the idea was they will deal with the customization, or they'll do X, Y, Z. And some of them would become, and we were sort of getting our head around how that would work, but also really conscious that we would make mistakes and we know the platform end to end. When someone doesn't know the speed at which we're evolving. And I think that was the other piece, right? You have implementation partners. It's a drag on how fast you can improve. Because by the time, if we make platform changes, and now we have to go tell 100 implementation partners, that takes a lot longer than telling 100 people internally. But as you reach a level of maturity, you need to shift the focus and saying, now we need people that can scale it, but then you reduce the ability to innovate. So we definitely started, looking at that. And so, to answer your question, it's like we had parts of the agency model, we had parts of the no-code, low-code model, we had parts of the vibe coding model, and we had parts of what was uniquely Builder. We brought them all together. Now, the thing that I think we stayed away from no-code, low-code was we didn't think the interface of a WYSIWYG editor, so, drag and drop, works for our customer. It's too complicated. And we replaced that with Natasha. So I would say, whilst when we started, you would put us in the low-code, no-code category, we very quickly moved out of that into what we worked with Gartner called composable software. And you're composing by talking. But, I'll give you a really funny example. Like, even Natasha's interface, it was asynchronous. So you would talk to her as a customer, she'd write back. And so in the beginning, I remember somebody said to me, oh, well, that feels like a technical limitation. I'm like, no. That's a design decision. Because when a non-technical person is writing versus speaking, they will restrict. Just because it's an uncomfortable, no one wants to type 300-400 words. But somebody will speak at, I think the average person speaks at 100 words a minute or something like that. So imagine 4 minutes, I've got 400 words. There's no chance to write 400 minutes. And so even if they were speaking at 50, 60 words per minute, and I got them to speak for 10 minutes, I got 600 words. And so we're like, we just want you to keep talking. But then the flip side was a non-technical or non-sophisticated software buyer, if you spoke back to them, you'd have to repeat it 4 or 5 times in different ways. AI wasn't sophisticated enough, still isn't, to be able to rationalize when to use the analogy, when to do that. Like that's the emotional part of reading the room. And so you know what? We're going to write to the customer because then they can read it 4 times. And so our interface was, you talk to us, we write back to you. You talk to us, we write back to you. And that was very important because that effectively did away with parts of the vibe coding and did away with a part of the agency model. And so we had elements of these things in it. Now people call them, forward deployed engineers, right? So we had forward deployed consultants, forward deployed product managers, forward deployed engineers, but the engineers weren't ours. They were from our expert network. So then the question is, why expert network? So we really toyed with this idea in the beginning. And we said, well, the easiest thing is just to hire. But then you have a capacity problem. The hardest thing is to build an expert network because of quality and governance, which we saw all the issues of. And I actually think there's a happy medium, which is where we were tending towards in 24. And then when the new CEO came on, I think he went the other extreme of pushing internal engineers to go do some of that customization. But I think that was much from a cost perspective. But I think there's a happy medium, right? And you need buffer. And especially because when we saw growth, it was hockey stick. But you also need quality and governance. No one had built an expert network like we had. And our expert network was entirely managed by machine. So it would make mistakes, right? We would have these fraud issues, these quality issues, the too much spend on the network issues. But the only way we could fix it was to fix the machine. And so we had concerted efforts around fraud detection, keystroke analysis, net lines of code. We even did this average lines of code written per minute. Net average lines of code written. We were trying to find the perfect golden metric that could tell us whether you're good or bad, so that we could then just offload you off the platform if you want.
Expert network is a very interesting concept. I always give the example of Uber, the biggest car company does not have cars, Airbnb, the biggest real estate company does not own real estate. And the vision, I feel that for Builder.ai, yes, we're going to have the biggest dev machine create codes with no developers at all.
Well, I don't think so we would have no developers.
Yes.
We would use the expert. And so I think there's really interesting analogy in what you said, right? Which is, so if you broke Builder down, one, you had the Lego, and we would build more Lego every time a new Lego block was needed.
Sure.
But the rate at which new Lego blocks were coming up was reducing drastically. Then we had this expert network, that we wanted to be higher quality, more controlled, more governed. And then we had the platform, and the platform's job was to minimize the usage of this, maximize the usage of the Lego blocks, and bring them together. And do it. And one ratio that was really important for us was how many build cards did we have per productologist? And that ratio was getting better every year. So we'd have more and more build cards, which means one human being internally could do a lot more. It was a superpower that we were trying to push towards. So in an agency world, going back to your earlier question, the pairing is 1:1, 1:2. At best, you'll have 2 customers to a project manager, usually 1. Well, we crossed that by eons. I think, we'd seen 15, 20. I think we had modeled it up to 40. But you can get to 40 if you had the right AI support and around it. And a lot of people said, well, it's never going to happen. You can't get to 20. Like the context switching is too high. I'm like, well, we got to figure out how to solve the context switching problem. Guess what? How do you solve context switching? With Natasha. But to be able to solve context switching, you need to own the meeting, you need to own the whiteboard, you need to own the tracking system, because otherwise you've lost context. That was the whole thing. My vision was very clear. I didn't want a human to own any one bit of information only in their head. Because I knew that even that one line of information that's only in your head means a system can't take it out. So we put every bit of glue wherever information was being created. We basically went to all the input sources, meeting, whiteboard, meetings, messaging. We said email. We're going to grab it right at input. And then we'll ask you, if we don't understand it, we'll ask the product, can you tell us this? Didn't understand this. What was this about? So you could connect lines to features and so on and so forth. And that was so important, because otherwise you never really built a human above the loop system. It was always a human in the loop.
What exactly happened between 2023 and the insolvency in May 2025?
It's very hard to say this as a statement of fact because there were so many moving pieces. But here's what I know. So I know that there was a paid smear campaign. It's kind of obvious when you do the analysis, right? Paid for newspaper, paid for journalists, crypto bros and crypto publications writing about neural networks when they've never written about it, trainee journalists writing for the first time. What I didn't really grasp was the extent of it. And what experts have now told me is that millions of dollars was spent on it. Kind of explains how this thing just blew up, right? And it was like one false narrative fed another false narrative, just take the fake AI one. Started with this paid for publication called the Washington Morning or the Washington Context or something. Looks like The Guardian, got nothing to do with The Guardian. Ends up being like some paid for publication out of Lithuania or Latvia. Then you have 2 crypto publications in Hong Kong. One called TechFlow Asia, one called Crypto something or Crypto City, like 16,000 subscribers, 20,000, but they get syndicated to Binance. So now suddenly it's like syndicated, right? And you look at their history of writing, like the same writer across both, only written 3 things, 2 of them on us. Then, and it was very smartly done. So one wrote, then you have this guy, apparently he's a crypto scammer, Bernard Engelbrecht. And he says, oh, Natasha has no neural network, only 700 Indians. So this guy usually has like 50 views on a post. This one has 250,000 views.
Oh, wow.
So how'd you go from 50 views to 250,000 views? Well, you've never written about neural networks before, and suddenly you're a neural network expert. And then he gets quoted by a trainee journalist in an Indian publication who writes about brand. She then gets quoted again by the same Hong Kong publication, another one, same writer. So now you have syndicated on Binance again. So you've got this it's called the verification loop. Effectively, one refers to the other, So then a bunch of the Indian media and others write quoting Bernard Engelbrecht. Now he's like some authority on AI. You just need to Google the guy and you'll see he scammed people for millions of dollars in crypto. Come on, guys. And the best was none of them reached out. So
None of them reach out.
No, none of them reached out to me. They just wrote, which is, by the way, why we have 86 takedowns. We have a court order telling media to take things down.
So you're able to take down 86.
86 blogs, newspapers around the world have taken articles down, and YouTube videos.
That's a lot of effort, man.
Don't ask. But I think what was really important was, so you had this campaign, right? And unfortunately, that created noise. And when it created the volume of noise, you're sort of like a deer in headlights. And so imagine it's like this paralysis where founders are species that find signal to noise ratio. And when all you find is noise and it's really hard to find signal, you've basically come to a crawl and the world is going at the speed of light. And, I remember when the first FT article came out where they said, oh, Sachin's involved in some criminal something in India. And I remember did a town hall with everyone. I was like, guys, I'm a witness. This is so stupid. Incidentally, 2 weeks ago, I won my Delhi High Court battle after 3 years against the agency that was doing the investigation, saying I am only a witness and you broke the law.
Oh.
And so to me, that is like total vindication. But when this article was written in 24, the journalist didn't want to meet me. I asked 6 times, can you please meet me? I'll explain it to you. No, I just need a quote. I was like, oh, in which case, deal with the lawyers. So you had this noise, and I went to the board and I said, hey, listen, I think you should do an independent investigation, get this cleared up. I have nothing to hide, and I'm not party to any of this. They did the investigation; it came out clear, but to a certain extent, the ship had sailed. Then, there were a bunch of other issues, which are like teething issues in the company. And if I think about hindsight, hired too fast, didn't fire fast enough. I kind of disagree. We built too much, but maybe we built too much. I trusted the wrong people. And, when someone used to say to me, you're like family, I'm there for you, you told me it's all that matters, I used to think that's a green flag. And I realized that if someone's being family, but they're wearing the wrong jersey, then they're not family. And I didn't realize the extent to which I'd been manipulated. So you had this whole period of 24 where all of the evidence points to a changing of narrative. And all in the background. Like, I don't find out about this stuff till way after. So what I would say is I didn't check enough. And that's a huge learning for me. When the dashboard says it's green, but the little bird on your shoulder says, check, 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 you kind of need to check. And so, we had an issue with resellers. And I brought it up to the board and said, we have an issue with resellers. I'll go dig into it. I don't know any of the resellers. I don't really get involved with them. We're also 800 people, 900 people. There's only so much I can look at, right? And on one hand, you tell me like delegate. On the other hand, he's like, you should know everything. And it turned out that they just weren't performing.
Resellers.
The resellers weren't performing, and mainly in some parts, certain specific regions. So I was like, okay, well, they're not performing. At the same time, it became pretty clear to me that we had a different direction of travel. And, for the year before, I'd spoken to my wife a couple of times and I said, look, it's been 8 years. I'm not sure if we're building in the same view. Like, the world is changing. We need to invest more. I tried this one big push thing, guys. We're going to get left behind if we don't invest now. My mistakes aside, the noise by the press aside, I think there was a fundamental difference in direction. So 2 or 3 times I almost wrote the email. And then it came down to this thing with the resellers and all the other moving elements. And it was like, we all agreed maybe it's the right time to bring in a seasoned leader, right? Who can take sort of hence all the press releases and so on and so forth. And so I really stepped away in end of Jan 25, beginning February, into a non-exec role. And to be honest, even that role adjusted as those months went on, not in the direction I'd hoped for. Like I felt like I had a lot of value to add on product and some of the sales. But, I think I remember this one conversation where a leader had said to me, Sachin, winning for me is seeing you as CEO again in a couple of years, once we've stabilized and done all of those things as we go public. And so every now and then I might need to throw you under the bus just to build a relationship.
What?
And, like a gullible person that I am.
That's a toxic relationship if I ever heard one.
And I said, I trust you. And so then sitting in this one board meeting, being thrown under the bus, and I'm thinking to myself, am I meant to react right now? Am I not meant to react? Like, is this a part of like the staged play? And, luckily I have an AI meeting recorder. So I'm like, I go back to this recording of the thing. I'm like, no, you definitely said that. And I'm pulling my hair out thinking like, what am I meant to do? So I'm silent. I was like, well, someone definitely knows about this situation or somebody definitely knows about this fact. And I didn't want to overreact because I'm not sure, what part of the game plan it is. And, so what starts off as bad news ends up as, this reseller issue, then goes on to new management, change of guard. And all I see is continuous kitchen sinking. It's like, this new person who sort of, led the fold after I left wasn't really a new person. I think there's enough news out there that shows the extent of involvement, right? Not just an observer.
There's a Business World article.
Yeah, it's pretty detailed. And early stage investors have done, I've done, everyone's done their own analysis. And, you can't suddenly wear thicker black frames and a new sweater and then just assume that the past is not your problem. And I think it taught me a really important lesson, which is there should never be a vacuum between the founder, CEO, and the board and investors. If you see a vacuum forming, you're letting someone else play the narrative. And you know what? You're going to have unhappy conversations. It's just a part of life. For me, Mahmoud, one of the biggest learnings was that, I grew up and my parents divorced and I did the divorce, so they separated early. And I didn't have a great relationship with my father. Unfortunately, he's passed away now. And so a lot of my adult life has gone in making sure no one's ever upset with me. And which is why I found negative news and everything else to be so much harder. Because like I just wake up in the morning saying, I just hope everyone likes me. And 2025 and all this experience to me is like, I don't give a shit anymore. It's like, screw you if you don't like me. But I need to love myself. And I think the need for people to like me created a vacuum and a position of being manipulated, which I wouldn't have been if I was just able to say it. It's like I'd struggled in some of the difficult meetings to say what I really thought because I just want people to be happy. I just, we'll get past this, we'll get it sorted out. So that had like everything from not being able to have that difficult conversation to if something went wrong, you would have seen this. Like I was there. Like if I had to sit next to an engineer, I sit next to an engineer. And what I didn't realize is to me, they were a colleague. To them, I was like the CEO. And so their world was falling apart that I had to sit next to them to solve a problem. I was doing it to be helpful.
And even the customer, they have your personal WhatsApp number and they text you and you used to send the message, guys, who's working on this one?
Yeah. And so I don't know how my number got out to so many people, but my number got out to many people. And to me, I lived and breathed for the platform and the customer. Like that's the only thing that mattered to me.
We discussed AI washing, but just want to dive deeper into inflated sales number. I know I read a lot about it. What was the story about it? I don't understand much, but they said.
So look, I think the real answer is no one really knows. I'll tell you why. So I know the gap between the reseller revenue.
Okay.
Right? Because that's when I was there. And we reversed out the reseller revenue because it wasn't performing. So imagine you have a contract with a reseller, says it's a minimum commitment, it's a legally binding contract. This has all been verified. And then you say you have to pay monthly.
Okay.
And every reseller, someone's behind, they don't pay. It's not like our controls are the best in the world, like I said, right? Checking and dashboarding. So at the end of it, we're like, you know what? We're going to change the revenue recognition policy. We'll just do it when they pay. Before that, the revenue recognition policy used to be as it's contracted. Before that, the revenue policy used to be on signing a contract. So you follow the policy and you change it. So we reverse it out. But that's at 25%. The rest of it, for all I know, is that as 2025's revenue numbers were being reduced, the forecasts were being reduced, magically 2024 was being reduced.
What?
And we would have and I found this out much after, right? So this is where I say this is what I've pieced together, because unfortunately I wasn't shared the information. We would have enterprise customers, especially in the GCC. And sometimes they needed the product before the contracting could be done.
Okay.
Very normal. Sure. In enterprise software, it's called unbilled revenue. And you always have a certain amount of unbilled revenue. It was my decision to do it, so I fully stand by it. These are big companies, and I needed to win the customer's confidence. So we have $10 million worth of unbilled revenue, or whatever it is. I can't remember the number. And that is taken out of 24. And then now the customer signs in 25 and starts to pay or whatever it is. It's in 25. So what did you do? You move revenue from 24 to 25. Now at Builder, we also had this concept of net revenue versus gross revenue. It's purely an internal metric, right? But it was the one that we thought it was the most prudent because it showed demonstration of platform value, right? Of what we were doing versus the cloud and everything else, right? It was just what was our earning. So software plus our margin on cloud. So I remember I saw this other one, which was 10 odd or 20 odd or 30 odd $1 million worth, I can't remember the exact number now, of revenue, of cost, moved from tech spend infrastructure to pass-through cost. So what does that mean? Let's just say you had $100 million gross revenue and your pass-through, which is what you pay for customer cloud accounts, was 10 million. Your net revenue would be 90. If you move 30 up, now you're taking away 40, so your net revenue drops to 60. All you've done is shift numbers around. The gross revenue never didn't change.
Okay.
And you just move things around. So in fact, you can show a bridge of all of these little changes and adjustments, which you might argue are the right changes, by the way. I don't deny that. But here's the thing. Those that were producing the numbers, those that were making the policies, those that were signing off on the policies, those that were reporting to investors, those that were doing the DD documents, those that reported to the lender, those people didn't change all the way up to the top. It went from a shadow role to a permanent role. And so the thing is, if you change it, great, you're being much more conservative. But here's the thing that I never really understood. You go to Bloomberg or FT and you say, I collected 100 million in cash last year. It's a good business. This is when you take over. And then you say your revenue is 50 million. So dude, how do you collect twice your revenue? So no one's the thing is, no one's, because obviously there's a lot of news. So a part of this is just bluster. So no one's sitting back and saying, oh shit, this doesn't make sense. Yeah. And then there's me sitting there saying, oh shit, this doesn't make sense. Another insane example. Apparently we did round tripping with Verse. That is just beyond silly.
Just mentioned many times, yes.
Yeah, and a lot of them be taken down. And so, except one, which I hope eventually will get taken down. Verse spent $85 million with us building software. The whole company knows we built software. They've seen the application. It was on Google Play, on the App Store. We built hundreds of versions of it for different creators and so forth. They bought cloud with us. They did a bunch of things. And we bought advertising with them. We got advertising reports. NVIDIA sells chips to OpenAI. OpenAI invests in Thrive. Thrive tells portfolio companies you'll get a better price if you buy OpenAI for your AI modeling needs. OpenAI then buys chips from NVIDIA. There's no round tripping because it's real work being done. There's no round tripping. We did real work. And so, and then, you know, somebody anonymously sent me this apparent investigation report, which feels like more like theater. And like, you'll fall off your chair. It's like they write, you know, we were given 68 gigs of data. Footnote, we do not have a chance to open 68 gigs of data. You know, so-and-so said no work was ever done. We did not have a chance to verify what so-and-so said. So you have this entire report of conjecture by a law firm that first says it's a draft report, secondly says we're not really a forensic firm, third, every statement has got conjecture underneath, has got like a footnote underneath it, which basically means it's theater. You fired the message off a law firm so you could use it elsewhere. And so like a bunch of early investors, myself, like we got a forensic firm to do it. They verified there was no round tripping. In fact, Versa's own investors verified it. They had 10 years of audits by Deloitte, clean. So I was like, how can one company be the round tripping and the other company is clean? Just think about it logically. But no one stopped to ask the question.
In many social media and magazines, I saw that this round tripping were being used just to inflate their revenue of Builder.ai, and it is not the real revenue.
But see, round tripping needs two. It's like clap. It's two hands. And round tripping is not circular. Round tripping is, did you do any work? That's actually round tripping. It's like, I gave you money, you gave it back to me, but we didn't do any work. In our case, gosh, like we had like, I don't know, was it 14,000 Builder tracker tickets? There were 900 odd licenses. Because see, in Builder's world, this is really important. When we sold you a feature, we sold you a fraction of the cost of the feature. Because let's just say login costs $5,000, we sold you for $200. Now, we had a mechanism to protect that you don't buy all our features and go build another builder. Right? So you could come in and say, I'm going to buy all 500 features, don't do anything, and then you have our IP. Mm-hmm. So we said you're constrained to a single instance. Mm-hmm. And first they wanted to build a fan app, a creator app for all the top creators on their platform. They have like a TikTok style platform. And they did the math. They're like, if we go buy all these different things, build it ourselves, it's going to end up being like, I think it was in rupee terms, like 30, 40,000 rupees over 5 years. No, $21,000? Was it 21,000? Yeah, 21,000. It was going to be like $40,000, $50,000 per creator for them, total cost. Maybe more. So we did a deal with them saying, you know what, like you're getting instances of this. It's like sort of gray in our licensing. We'll support all 1,000 creators or whatever it is, which means we have to support 1,000 different applications. But we'll do it as a 5-year license fee, which includes upgrades, so on and so forth. And you buy per creator. And we did $21,000 for 5 years, which came to about $300 a month. Mm-hmm. If you looked at all the other things they'd have to buy, it was coming to like $600, $700, $800. So they got a deal. We got a really good customer. And what was important to us is we were part of a big platform, so we could use that as a showcase. It was a case study on our website. Like, you don't go round trip and then put a case study, launch the app in App Store and Google Play, and you know, versus like telling folks, come and see the work product. It's all here.
Is there a possibility that someone were cooking the books until your time being a CEO, or no, not really?
No, I don't think so. I mean, look, the resellers is the resellers. Is all accounting 100% accurate? No. But was there someone sitting there cooking the books? No. Oh, not to my knowledge anyway. And the point is different. If you were cooking the books, then stalled contracts stay stalled contracts. If you're cooking the books, then unbilled stays unbilled.
You can,
it doesn't suddenly become billed. It doesn't suddenly become recovered. That's the point. So the resellers, you actually took out. Mm-hmm. Fair enough. We took it out. And the resellers, we said, if they pay, we'll collect it. We'll mark it as revenue. Everything else was a shift.
You received the call that Viola Credit froze $37 million of funds. And you looked at the office, everyone is going by their day normal, and it was like the biggest news ever. What was going through your head?
Well, I didn't receive the call. I wasn't there, right? So remember, I've left in end of Jan. I'm getting basically almost no information at this point. And I get this email, like, Viola's done this, and I'm like, oh, they sweep their account for what? This is on a Friday. They've locked the accounts. Sunday, they've swept it. So we end up having this thread. And it turns out that, there was one message floating around saying, well, they can't really be unhappy with anything except this one undisclosed liability. Let's call it liability X. It's like, okay. And I was like, but I'm confused. Like, you knew about this liability on Jan 2nd. When did you tell them? Middle of April. And so then, like I said, one of those things, right? You're sitting in this meeting and you're not sure what you're meant to say or not say. And a long story short, one of the early investors then sort of did the whole analysis around this, and it was like the liability was known from Jan 2nd, not disclosed to investors, board, or the lender, till I think the investors middle of March, and the lender beginning of April. And so you got them to agree to the go forward plan, reduce revenue, all of that. And then you obviously are kitchen sinking their revenue. And the lenders have now put in, the investors have now put in another 70 odd bucks. And no one knows about this. And so conveniently you then blame me. And I was like, well, it couldn't have been me because I was disqualified from being a part of the matter. So even if I knew, I can't tell anyone. Because it would be a formal communication. And actually, the point is I didn't know. I didn't know what was settled. I didn't know what was the final agreement. And I told the right person that I thought would handle this because they said they would. And it was just swept under the carpet for months until all the monies came in and the renegotiation was. And then I think the view was, well, we'll deal with this another day. Right. And it was very similar to like one of the calls I had from someone in finance. It was just like a bizarre call. And they said, we've been told to like adjust the revenue to this, so that folks invest. And I mean, I'm long gone at this point.
Someone called one of the employees and told them to adjust numbers.
After I left.
After you left.
Yeah. Don't make it less than this. No one will invest.
But this is illegal, no?
and I'm just thinking, I was like, what I could say, they asked you to do what? And so in my response to it was, they asked you to do what?
Oh God.
And I was in IKEA. And so I was walking in IKEA and I'm thinking, I don't even know what to do. Who do I ring? What do I do? And then
you'll be liable for any formal communication at that point.
Well, forget that. I mean, number one, I don't know to what extent it's true. Right. Okay. Number two is like I'm falling off my chair at this point. You're sort of like a deer in headlights, and then the thing is like you heard the call, but then never saw the material, so you can't verify. All you can verify is someone called to say X, right? And I was just so mentally burnt at this point. I was like, I don't trust anything. So anyway, then we go to Viola. This whole thing happens. So I get a phone call on the 14th. We need money. I'm confused at this point. And then they took all the money. We only have this much. We need to make payroll. Can you lend us money? I hold these investors by asking me. No, everyone's going to be slow, but so ask one obvious question. So we're going insolvent. Is it chapter 7 or 11? No. We've got options. We've got backups. This is just to help us get through. It's like, okay, great.
Just for my audience, chapter 7, 11 or bankruptcy.
Bankruptcy, yeah. And so I lend $300,000 out of my own account. I send it in 24 hours. Next day.
To meet payroll.
Next day, a board member resigns. I'm like, why does this board member resign? And what's going on? The day after, there's a presentation of a pre-pack plan.
Okay.
A pre-packaged plan basically means to orderly wind down the company, strip out the assets, start a new company. And I'm like, I'm so confused at this point.
You're the founder. You're the CEO.
I'm not the CEO. But I'm more confused because I just lent money.
Okay.
And I agreed to not to be junior to everyone else because I thought this is just like, and I said, like, we had our misgivings, we had our misunderstandings, we had our issues, like this is a good way to clean the slate. But I asked for information then when I was lending. So I got all this information, which in a blessing in disguise, like I started to figure out what's going on. So then when the insolvency gets announced on the 20th, I'm having coffee with someone because I don't even know about it.
Oh,
I find out half an hour before, and it's on an email. So I'm not checking the email, I'm looking at it. And then I find out by looking at Bloomberg.
really?
Yeah, that we've gone insolvent. And like my phone is like blowing up at this point. And I'm like, oh my God. And I always thought that there was a plan and so on and so forth. Then I saw this pre-pack plan and something or the other. It just was not clear. And so then I'm sort of being told, like, approve these payments because they've not changed a signatory on one of the accounts for 4 months. I was like, well, I don't really want to be approving payments. No, but we need to do it. And then like other people are being invited into that email thread, board members are messaging, you got to do it. Tell us if there's a problem, telling whoever was asking me. And then I realized that, a very large sum of money is going to one person. And I was like, well, I don't know what this is about. I can't approve it. And so then it goes back to the board. No, it's been approved and so forth. And I was like, oh my God, this is doing my head in. Fine, I'll just approve it. Okay. I was like, but I have no idea what it's for. And you know what? If this kind of money was going to be done, like there needs to be a board approval beforehand. I'm thinking to myself, and I'm like, I don't even know about the amount. And that's what really like for the first time I started to see the difference in 90 days. Like I send money to make sure folks on the ground get paid.
Yeah.
Almost 2/3 of it goes to one person. And then we have people without payment, without salaries. And yet the discourse in all the Builder WhatsApp groups and everything, it's all Sachin's fault. Guys, one person can't cause this much chaos. Second thing is, I tried to make sure everyone got paid. What more would you want me to do?
And 2/3 of that money went to one person. Is it safe to say that the current CEO?
Went to one person.
Okay.
Went to one person.
Safe to say.
And I think the rest of it's already written online. So, I'd recommend everyone to go see this.
I'll include the article.
And I was just mortified. And then I'm hearing people, I had someone who reached out. They're like, our kid's in hospital. We haven't been paid. Like, I need to pay for the hospital fees. I was like, I'll sell someone with the cash. So pay that. And someone else saying, the UK insolvency stuck. We need money. I was like, look, I have nowhere to hire you right now, but I can give you some advance. And then I was sitting with Pooja. She said, well, how many folks are you going to do one-by-one bailouts? And I said, I don't have the resources to bail one-by-one. And then they started like this news around my secondary sales and so on and so forth. And I'm like, guys, like this is all above board, all approved. Like, what's the point? And I realized it was just an alignment of interests of folks that just wanted to make sure I got buried. And I remember saying to someone, I was like, you can do a lot of stuff. The thing you can't do is mortgage my mind. And so think what you want of me. But, one of the lead investors said to me when some of the other side of the news was coming out, they're like, oh, you should just tell people you ran fast, learned a lot, and moved on to your next adventure. It's like, great. So Mahmoud, I ran fast, learned a lot, moved on to my next adventure. I made a ton of mistakes, but I don't own any of the narrative that's out there. That's not my doing.
Which why I really appreciate you coming here. And again, this is owning the narrative, not just for you.
Yeah.
It's for the people that used to work in Builder.ai. Because now some of them, they start to have the doubts. Maybe something was going on, which is no, there's nothing going on.
No, and I think, the thing that really upset me the most is that folks work really hard around the clock. And all success was theirs. ultimately, these failures, the failures boil down to me. But it's not because I did something wrong. The failures boil down to me, like I said, grow too fast, didn't check enough, trusted the wrong people, definitely trusted the wrong people, didn't call a spade a spade. And there are lessons that will guide whatever I do next. And, you know, I'm not interested in the arc of redemption. I just want to be held to a higher standard in whatever I do next. And I think that's the most important thing. And, you know, I've seen, there's this little espionage group. When I was going to go speak somewhere or do something, they would start writing to the organizer. It's this small group of folks that are like somebody's henchmen or henchwomen. And like I started laughing.
That's a movie.
I was like, guys, like, get on with your life. And I said, you do realize like you're creating an impact for me to go help more of our own builder family. I was like, personally, it's fine for me. It doesn't make a difference.
Builder.ai, what's next?
So look, the thing that I realized a lot was the world doesn't have a software problem as much as it has a knowledge problem, whether it's misinformation, wrong knowledge, so on and so forth. But even at Builder, one of the things that I was really just so like fixated with, I remember this one discussion we were having, right? Can we learn things from people's emails? Can we learn all of, I was like, we spend 3 hours a day searching for stuff. And wouldn't it be great if you didn't need to search anymore? Search for emails, search for files. I remember when I used to get asked questions in the last year, some of it would be like 4 hours of searching for stuff. Going through WhatsApp messages, going through, oh, thank God I found this. Here's a really funny one. The New York Times, they did this hit piece. Piece. And they said I hired a Greek chef and I flew the Greek chef on company expenses.
Good for him.
Well, so I hired him personally because he was a friend of ours who was not doing well. But then I found the invoice for the travel and I paid for it personally. And I always kept saying I paid for it personally. And it was like randomly going through some WhatsApp message somewhere else and I found it. And I was like, you know, if I had a system where I could just ask for it and it'd give me a non-hallucinated answer, wouldn't it be great?
Okay.
You know, how many times do we have meetings where we're trying to follow up from actions from the last time we met? One of the things I started to realize was actually we have the same meeting again and again, and none of the things move. So I said, okay, if we were to think about this kind of platform, you know, it's like building your second brain. And so it's called Second Brain with a K. And really the problem we're trying to solve is how do we make 3 hours of search into 5 minutes? How do we make sure that you proactively have information for the things that you need when you need them? Meeting, notes, so on and so forth. But more importantly, it's a bit more fundamental. It's saying that, look, if I took all the concepts that you discuss across email, notes, WhatsApp, meetings, the compression is 94%, 95%, meaning we repeat a lot. So an average person, Mahmoud, speaks for about 55,000 minutes a year in a 12-month period. It's about 2,000 unique minutes.
That's a one way to look at it.
The rest of it is highly repetitive.
Okay.
Right? Maybe if you're very extroverted, it's like 3,000 or 4,000 unique, but it ain't 25,000 unique minutes. You know, an airline that gets 500 million minutes of calls a year, they only have about 18,000, 20,000 minutes of unique conversation.
All right.
And so we said, well, you know, if you imagine like a puzzle of the Serengeti, right? You have the sky, you have the animals, you have the ground, you have the trees, and you scatter the puzzle across the floor. The language model tries every combination. And so you might have the butt of a bison connected to a trunk of a tree and it says, ta-da. We would call that a hallucination. Yeah. And so we said, well, no, we want to build a concept model which says, no, this is an animal, this is a tree, there's no connection between them. And so that means it's grounded. This whole field of AI is called neurosymbolic. And what we're trying to solve is, how do we make sure you have a second brain for everything you know, whether it's stored in files, emails, documents, chats, what have you, and it brings meaning to it. So we're converting scattered files into intelligence. The second is, you can then build agents on top. And today, the way agents are being built, they have to continuously get in sync with each other. It's like humans. And the reason is our minds can't be connected. But agents are software, their minds can be connected. So at the moment, we're building agents to have human dysfunction at machine scale. Well, what if the agents could just build off your second brain and they can do things for you? And then the third is, and this is what my research paper I'm just finished off taught me, is that bias is really important. We think it's a negative, but bias is actually how we stay consistent. I imagine waking up every morning and having a different frame of reference for the same thing. Like, it'd be super disconcerting. What if you could, and we're sort of thinking out loud, what if you could read an article, browse the internet, have a conversation, but it gave you an answer, or you read it where it picked up from where you left off, meaning it already knows what you know. I think that's the future. So imagine you're learning, you're reading an article about, let's just say the change of oil in the GCC and its prominence over the last 100 years. Now, there could be multiple different people that are reading that article. One of them could be an oil expert or a historian. And one of them could be an 11-year-old in class. One of them could be even younger. So they'll all have different starting points. Someone might be asking, like, well, what were the GCC countries? Someone may not even know sort of like how important oil was, right? Or what was the real use case of it. So imagine being able to start from where their knowledge tapers. So you're effectively starting the article from where, and it's a bridge to the main article then. So suddenly now, we don't have one piece of content that everyone has to read and then do their own research and figure out. It's effectively creating a gradient ramp. So you read the article, but it already knows what you know. And it knows what you know because second brain's already mapped out every concept. So across all your files and emails, and this is a really important one. People think files, an email, a document, a presentation, a meeting transcript. Files are the atomic unit of knowledge. They're not. Concepts are the atomic unit of knowledge. What's a file? A file is a series of concepts in an order.
Okay.
What's a meeting? A series of concepts. What's this podcast? A series of concepts in an order. Now, imagine the things that we discussed today. You could look at those concepts and I'd have emails on them. I'd have notes on them. So if I wanted to ask about, like, when have we discussed revenue recognition? It would give me all sorts of answers from all different places sequenced together. And I wouldn't know that today. So you imagine now, like, what are the use cases, right? So another example is, imagine an online newspaper. Or, I mean, how many podcasts have you done?
60, 70.
Right, great. So if you took 70 podcasts, it's a wealth of knowledge. And imagine in the 70 podcasts, you had the transcripts for all of them. Today, if somebody wanted to learn about something, I guarantee that at least 3 or 4 of your podcasts would have covered that subject matter. There's no easy way for them to get that answer today. They have to go listen to all of them.
True.
Then they have to get in a research assistant or someone to sit and write out all those pieces. Well, what if they could just ask a question and it could go through every one of the podcasts, pick out the extracts, synthesize the answer and give it to you? That's the power of a concept model. That's the power of neurosymbolic.
And is the product ready yet?
It's still in development. We're in research. We're aiming for a early 2026 release. And super excited.
2026.
2026.
Beginning, early, late?
Beginning.
That's the beauty of founders. Yes, you have some people, espionage group, write essays, and you have founders that always can create value. And some people, they cannot create. Some people can create value. That's why I'm so excited for your next chapter.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and setting the record straight.
Thank you. Thank you so much.